L'energia è come un grande mare, in cui siamo tutti alla ricerca di una riva, un punto d'approdo sicuro, un partner affidabile che ti sappia dare ciò che serve, quando serve e alle tariffe migliori sul mercato. Come Tea Energia, che con la sua lunga esperienza e la sua rete capillare di sportelli e agenti sul territorio è da sempre al tuo fianco. Un riferimento sicuro e garantito. Un punto fermo. Il vostro.
Buon pomeriggio a tutti. A nome del comitato organizzatore di Festivaletteratura ringraziamo Tea Energia per aver contribuito alla realizzazione di questo evento e diamo il benvenuto a Jonathan Silvertown. Per riascoltare questo e gli altri eventi della 21esima edizione di Festivaletteratura visitate il sito archivio.festivalletteratura.it da gennaio 2018.
Gli accenti di qua, il resto qua e là, ma solo per 30 minuti. Dateci un po' del vostro tempo, noi ci mettiamo l'accento. Presenta Maurizio Matrone.
Buon pomeriggio, benvenuti. Grazie per essere qui a questo appuntamento del venerdì. E tra poco sarà qui con noi Jonathan Silvertown che parlerà di cibo, bere, ma con Darwin, e però in inglese. Questo accento è tutto in lingua inglese. E anche le domande dovranno essere in lingua inglese, ovviamente lo saranno anche le risposte. E da questo momento partiranno i famosi ormai 30 minuti e lascio la parola per questo appuntamento al nostro ospite Jonathan Silvertown. Thank you.
Thank you very much. How wonderful it is to be here on a beautiful day in this beautiful city. I'm going to talk about food. How many people here like food? How many people love food? Okay, so I think that covers everybody, which is fortunate. We're going to have a conversation about food and the fact, starting with the fact that everything we eat has evolved. Everything we eat has evolved. Everything we drink, apart from water, contains something that has evolved. And what this means is that every meal is a dinner with Darwin, because Darwin discovered the mechanism by which evolution occurs, and that's why we are here and why everything we eat exists. So this is fundamental to food, and it's also fundamental to human evolution. These two facts are obvious, but they're very rarely mentioned. So let me give you a little puzzle. I don't know if you can see this cake. This is a Christmas cake. And this Christmas cake was baked by a botanist who won a competition to create a recipe with the largest number of species of plant in it. So just shout out, how many species of plants do you think there might be in this prize-winning cake? 20? Higher? Anybody? Okay, I can't quite hear, but so let me show you how many species there are in this cake, just to illustrate how many species we are able to eat. This is a list. Of course, it's in English, but that doesn't matter. You can see each one is a different species, and there are 127 or more in that cake. But in fact, we eat many more plants than that, and we eat many animals as well. So the biodiversity of our planet is, in a sense, at our mercy. It's on our table. And there are many, many stories that can be told about how those food items evolved, how we influenced their evolution, and especially how they influenced our evolution. So that's what we're going to talk about in the next half an hour or so, and I hope to leave enough time at the end for a few questions, and of course I'm available if anybody wants to talk about it later. So the story begins with the family tree of the primates. So we are primates. In fact, we are great apes. I'm not being personal. We're all great apes. And this is our cousin, the chimpanzee. Here's a gorilla, a more distant relative. And here is the branch of the primate tree with the hominins. So the hominins are the human branch of the great apes. And what's interesting, if you look at the diet of our relatives and our ancestors, and I'll come on to the evidence for the ancestral diet in a moment, is that these are all vegetarian. Chimpanzees eat mainly fruit, and occasionally, as a treat, they'll eat monkeys. So they're not entirely vegetarian, but they're mainly vegetarian. So what this means is, well, we're not descended from these apes, but we are apes. And so if you go back to the common ancestor that we share with chimpanzees, that common ancestor was probably vegetarian, and of course we today eat meat. So this is the first question. How did we evolve a change in diet from just eating fruit and vegetables and leaves to eating meat? How did we become omnivores, animals that eat anything? And then the next question is, when did we begin to cook? Now, cooking is, of course, crucial to cuisine, but was it always so? When did it begin? When did we start farming? Farming is where nearly all our food comes from today. Very few species are gathered in the wild, maybe some fungi, some fish, but increasingly even fungi and fish are farmed. And dairying, milk, cheese, yogurt, all those things, of course they come from dairy cattle, mainly cattle, sheep as well sometimes. When did that start? And finally, I'm going to just talk a little bit about how we evolved a taste for alcohol. So let's begin with a famous fossil called Lucy. Who has heard about Lucy? Lots of people have heard about Lucy, and she belonged to a species called Australopithecus afarensis, and the importance of this fossil was that it's a fossil of the species that gave rise to Homo, to man. So that whole branch, the hominins, at the base is this species, Australopithecus afarensis, and this fossil was discovered in East Africa, which is the home of our species and all the hominins. So we are all Africans. Whatever we look like, whether we're white or black or something in between, originally we come from here, and this was our earliest ancestor before Homo. And the key thing about her was that she walked on 2 feet. And she wasn't strictly a climber in the way that chimpanzees, for example, are. Last year, there was a fascinating study discovering how she died, how this particular individual died, and analyzed the fractures in the arm bones and discovered they were the same as would happen if this individual had fallen from a tree like that. And that tells us 2 things. One is she did climb trees, and the second one is she was no good at it. So this is significant because, of course, if she was walking on the ground, then there are different kinds of food available. And you can find bones like this of the same age. This is about 3.5 million years ago, of, in this case, a cow, a large cow kind of animal. And the bone, this is a fossil bone, and it has cut marks in it, made by a stone tool. So this is evidence that animals, apes of her kind, Australopithecus, hominins, 3.4 million years ago were probably eating meat. And if we now leap forward to about 1.5 million years ago, we come to one of our other ancestors, this time in the human genus, Homo erectus. And wherever you find Homo erectus, you will also find the bones of the animals that they ate. So you can see here that here's somebody excavating a Homo erectus site in Tanzania, again in East Africa, and these are very big bones. And they were the bones of very large animals that Homo erectus ate. And wherever you find Homo erectus and this species, as we did millions of years later, this species dispersed across Europe and Asia. You can find fossils of Homo erectus as far afield as China. And what they did was they hunted big animals, animals much bigger than humans. So Homo erectus stood about this high. They were quite like us, but they were shorter and stockier. And for small apes to successfully hunt big animals, they have to have two characteristics. They have to be clever, and they have to work together. And the prize for doing that, the prize for cooperation, is enough meat to feed everybody. So this creates conditions for social cooperation. And you only have to look around you to appreciate the significance of social cooperation. Okay? So I think it's reasonable to say that this is how social cooperation in humans evolved. It's because we started catching big animals that required cooperation, and the result was enough food to feed everybody. So that then means there's no need to compete about food. And so you get things like this. This is, of course, the Last Supper. But the key thing here is that humans are the only animals that willingly share food with strangers. Chimpanzees sit in trees and they keep the food to themselves. If they catch a monkey, they try and keep it to themselves. They cooperate to some degree to catch the monkey, but the one who actually catches it wants to eat the whole thing himself. So we don't behave like that. We are inherently sharing when it comes to food and in many other ways as well. And that's unique. And that has to come from our history and what I've just discussed. So you see that the evolutionary history of food is of much wider significance than just food. It gets to the very basis of all the things we do socially, like going to book festivals, but also religion and everything else. I don't need to go into it. Okay. So the next thing we're going to look at is cooking. So now we have in the history of humans, we have started eating meat. We have started sharing food. And we are intelligent, and we're getting bigger. So Australopithecus, Lucy, was about this high. Homo erectus was about this high, and I'm probably about average height. So for a human, depending on where you are. So where did the energy come from for this to happen? And an important place where we get our energy is from cooked food. So this pot here, this cooking pot, is like an external stomach. It's like a way of obtaining energy from your food before you eat it. It helps with digestion. So for example, potatoes, if you eat potatoes without cooking them, you get almost no food value, no energy. If you cook the potatoes first, you get a lot of energy. And this applies to lots of vegetables. And it, of course, also makes the food tastier. If you offer great apes cooked food and raw food, they will go for the cooked food. They prefer it, even though they can't cook it themselves, obviously. It also means that we can eat plants that would be poisonous to us otherwise. Cooking makes more food available to us. And so there's a convincing hypothesis, I find it a convincing hypothesis, that cooking changed our evolution. The question is, when did it start? So here are illustrated 4 of the key players in the whole story. Okay, so this is Homo sapiens, this is Homo erectus. If it was drawn to scale, it would be about this high. Here is Australopithecus, this is a species that Lucy belonged to, and here is a chimpanzee for comparison. And what you can immediately see is that there's a big gap between Australopithecus and Homo. Okay? Bigger, smaller teeth, smaller gut, not as well adapted for climbing trees. And a lot of these changes happened here between Australopithecus about 3.5 million years ago and Homo erectus about 1.5 million years ago. So a professor at Harvard called Richard Wrangham has written this very nice book which says that this change here, these changes were because Homo erectus learned to cook. Homo erectus had fire. We don't know that for sure, it's a hypothesis. And the result was that there was enough energy out of food to get a big brain, and the rest is evolutionary history. So cooking, if this is correct, and I think it is, because no human today is able to live on raw food. It's physiologically impossible. You cannot get enough energy from raw food, from raw vegetables and meat to live. People who try it essentially have to give up or die. So this suggests that cooking must be very ancient, much older than the Romans or the ancient Egyptians, probably 1.5 to 2 million years old, which is amazing. So you could consider this to be the evolutionary biology of restaurants, cuisine in general. Very ancient. And maybe some of the recipes are equally ancient. So I'm quickly going to move now to much nearer the present. This is a map. You probably can't see it very clearly, but it's basically designed to show you where many of the plants that we eat evolved, where they were first taken from the wild and grown in gardens and farms in a process called domestication. So in this area here in Southwest Asia, wheat, barley, peas, lentils were first domesticated. And you can still find wild examples of these plants in those places. But there are 20 places around the world where a similar process happened. So for example, in New Guinea, sugarcane was domesticated. In China, it was rice. In Mexico, it was maize. And in the Andes, potatoes. So if you think about it, think about what you might be eating tonight. Your plate would look very different and be much less interesting if it weren't for this amazing history of domestication and exchange of plants across the planet. So in the process of domestication, we changed our food in some very consistent ways. So here in the center of this circle are a number of seeds of plants that we eat today. So these are pistachios, these are peanuts, this is maize, this is rice, coffee, soybeans. And then on the outside of the ring are seeds of the wild equivalent, the plants in the wild that these domesticated varieties were made from. And this process clearly increased the size of the seeds, making it possible to eat bread and polenta and all the other things that we make from seeds. And So this is a general effect of our farming on the evolution of the plants. We didn't just change our food, but our food has changed us in some very fundamental ways. And dairying illustrates this. So are there any people in the audience who cannot drink milk because it makes them ill? Yeah, well, I'm one as well. And there are two: you might be allergic to milk, or you may be lactose intolerant. And the thing about, I'm not trying to diagnose you, let me say that, but the thing about milk, well, there are two really interesting things about milk. One is, we're mammals. So we evolved to drink milk. As babies, we drank milk from our mother's breast. And that's very similar in composition to what other mammals like cows and goats produce as well. So if there's one food that you could say evolution intended us to have, it's milk. And yet, 2/3 of the world population is unable to drink milk as adults. Okay? We can all drink milk as babies, but doing that depends upon being able to digest a sugar called lactose. And what happens is that babies have in their stomach a chemical, something called an enzyme. This particular enzyme is called lactase, and it turns lactose into ordinary sugar, into glucose, which the body can then use. The body can't use lactose without turning it into glucose. And the neat thing about enzymes, like enzymes in washing powder, for example, they operate at lower temperature. You know, if you buy an enzyme washing powder, it says on the packet, use a low temperature. So the neat thing about enzymes in general is they operate at body temperature. You can do what the pot did, digesting food, but at body temperature because of enzymes. Now, babies have lactase, adults don't in general. The gene that makes this enzyme is turned off in adults. So when dairying first evolved, or was first developed about 9,000 years ago in Anatolia in Turkey, no adult was able to drink that milk without getting stomach pains and unpleasant effects. So what did they do? Well, they turned the milk into yogurt and into cheese. This uses bacteria, which are in the air. They come naturally. If you leave milk out, it will naturally turn into yogurt. And the bacteria that do that can have lactase, and they actually are using up the lactose sugar. So then it's possible, if you are lactose intolerant, to eat these things. If you're allergic to milk, don't try it. That's a different deal. But if you're lactose intolerant, then there is no lactose in yogurt or cheese because it's been used up by the bacteria that have made those two foods. And so even today in Turkey, you will be served this, and most people in Turkey are unable to drink liquid milk. But then what happened was that evolution started to work on the human species, and we got a situation like this. So this is a map of the world showing where people who can drink milk as adults live. And you can see that Northern Europe, so the darker color means like 90% of people can drink liquid milk. And you can see there's, in Northern Europe, a big population here, in Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, West Africa, and a small area of South Africa. And in each of those cases, what happened was there was a mutation which basically gives adults the ability to digest lactose. And so using genetics, scientists have been able to date the mutation that is responsible for that in Europe. It's occurred 7,500 years ago. and it spread very rapidly. Within 2,000 years, it spread right across Europe. This is the fastest known evolutionary change in modern humans, and it's to do with food. You may wonder why people in Saudi Arabia have this ability to tolerate milk, and they drink camel's milk. So this is a beautiful example of how our food has changed us, and I'm just going to close by talking, of course, about alcohol. And this is a much, much older story. So the story begins not even 20 million years ago when apes evolved, but actually 150 million years ago when the white stuff on this plum evolved, the ability to use what's inside this plum. The white stuff on the outside is yeast. It's the kind of stuff you make bread with. And inside, there's lots of sugar. So 150 million years ago, yeast evolved the ability to use the sugar made by plants. Plants that make flowers and fruit evolved 150 million years ago. So there was alcohol around. Fruit plus yeast make fruit plus yeast make alcohol. There was alcohol around when the apes evolved 20 million years ago. And so for a very long time, apes, like us, have had to be able to deal with alcohol. I think I'm going to stop there because my friend over there has been signaling to me that we've nearly finished. So I'd be happy to take some questions.
Al microfono. Volevo dirvi che abbiamo lo spazio per una domanda, insomma, se ci fosse, che insomma mi sembra che gli argomenti siano molto interessanti, la vedo qui. Una domanda precisa e veloce.
Do you think that vegetarians can survive with a vegetarian-based diet and or vegans, that it's a diet that can let them survive even though they do not eat meat?
Yeah, definitely, but you have to cook the food. If you try and live on raw food, then no.
Do you eat raw food? And
If they eat only raw food, they're in trouble.
Okay.
Lo spazio per un'altra, l'ultima, vediamo di qua. Vengo io,
I heard a theory about the fundamental role of warm blood animals' meat for the evolution of the brain. Mm-hmm. Because there are the complete series of amino acids just inside the meat of mammals.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So in particular, and some fatty acids as well. So not fatty acids, so omega-3 fatty acids are very important in the development of the brain. So clearly, yes. And I think if you eat a vegetarian diet, it has to be a very broad one. Oh, Yes. So meat, yes. So you're saying that meat was important to the evolution of large brain size. Yes, I think that's correct.
Ok, invece per l'evoluzione del nostro tempo dobbiamo concludere qui questo accento. Grazie, thank you. Grazie al nostro autore. Vi ricordo che Stay here, please. Vi ricordo che i suoi libri sono disponibili nel banchetto dove c'è il punto libri. E io credo che lui sia molto contento di autografarveli, quindi se li volete acquistare lui può restare qui per autografarli. Grazie, ci vediamo al prossimo appuntamento.
L'energia è come un grande mare, in cui siamo tutti alla ricerca di una riva, un punto d'approdo sicuro, un partner affidabile che ti sappia dare ciò che serve, quando serve e alle tariffe migliori sul mercato. Come Tea Energia, che con la sua lunga esperienza e la sua rete capillare di sportelli e agenti sul territorio è da sempre al tuo fianco. Un riferimento sicuro e garantito. Un punto fermo. Il vostro.